Welcome to Factory Forward, the podcast at the forefront of modern manufacturing. In this episode, we're joined by Matt Barber, VP and GM of MES at Infor and the founder of MES Matters, a voice driving awareness on the essential role of manufacturing execution systems in today's smart factories. With a unique background that bridges computer science, business, and hands-on shop floor expertise, Matt shares his journey from student intern to MES thought leader. We'll dive into the evolution of MES and MOM, explore their growing role in digital transformation, and tackle the biggest misconceptions holding manufacturers back. From the cloud revolution to AI, operator-first design, and real-world success stories, this conversation is packed with insights for any manufacturer looking to build a smarter, more connected future. Now, here's your host, Zishan Zia.
Hi everyone, welcome back to Factory Forward. Today we are joined by Matt Barber, VP and GM of MES at Infor, and the founder of MES Matters. With a deep passion for manufacturing execution systems, Matt is on a mission to educate the industry on MES's critical role in modern factories. We'll dive into his journey, insights, and the future of smart manufacturing. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Matt, I'm really interested in your background to start out with. You did your you did your degree in computer science, and then went into roles that require you to go on factory floors, talk to people, try to understand manufacturing itself. How did that happen? Why did you go into a more traditional, software engineer path?
It's a good question. So the course that I actually did was a combination of computer science and business. So it was like a 70-30 split. So 70% computer science and 30% business. So I knew I was always interested, not just in the technical side of things, but why do we create the products we create? What problems is it really trying to solve? What value can it add for people in the wider world? I actually ended up doing a student year at this company called Lighthouse. I did a student year, which was fantastic. And at the end of that, I went back to university for one final year, and Lighthouse offered me a job. So I joined again after my degree had been finished, and I've been there ever since. So yeah, the company Lighthouse actually ended up being acquired by Infor in 2021.
Yeah.
And like you say, I've done pretty much every role in that company. Maybe not every role, but lots of different departments that I've worked in, which I've really loved. Getting a broad experience of those different departments and the kind of the challenges that they face. And I was very lucky to work in the services team for a long time, which meant that I could go to customer sites and walk the shop floor and understand the customer problems. And I really love walking the shop floor. I love seeing how things are made. I especially love doing that in the food industry where you can take a nice sample off the line. That always helps. And then I moved into various different roles. So I was in product for a long time. Never had an official pre-sales title, but I did a lot of the pre-sales activities, demoing, understanding requirements, doing discovery, those kind of things. So yeah, I've really enjoyed that. It's a nice, well-rounded experience. And yeah, love being out on the shop floor and actually living and breathing it.
Love it. Matt, as somebody who's been in this industry then, for over a decade at this point, more like probably maybe almost 15 years. And I would say that you got the chance to see that cloud revolution happen right in front of your eyes, and how MES and cloud interacts. How have MES and MOM evolved in recent years, and what's driving these changes? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I think, firstly, I would say that it is changing. It's definitely changing. Things are becoming more well known. If you look at manufacturers across the globe, the majority of them still operate on paper and Excel. They might have the occasional departmental application, but those typically don't talk to each other. And that means that the MES MOM space is actually being filled with lots of disparate systems and paper and whiteboards, and it's a bit of a mess, to be honest with you. So I think that is changing with the introduction of things like Industry 4 and smart manufacturing and IoT. People are hearing these buzzwords and they want to know more. They want to invest in those areas, which is great. So I think as things are becoming kind of more well known in the market, people want to transform their operations. They want their manufacturing environment to be smarter. They want to deliver the right information to the right time for their operators. They want real-time visibility of operations. All of these benefits that you get from using these types of systems, and that's creating more of a hunger in the market to implement some of these things. In terms of the actual technology side of things, I think technology has moved a long way since I left university. We hire a lot of young graduates into the business, and they are brilliant, great minds. But every few years they're learning new technologies and new ways of doing things because that's how quickly the market moves. And I think it's very important as a company that is delivering this type of software to make sure that you're staying up to date with those modern trends. Make sure that your code that you're writing, the products that you're creating are innovative, are modern, have a beautiful user experience. I think increasingly people are used to using your mobile phone all day long. So if you're an operator, you're used to having an iPhone or an Android phone, and then you go onto a shop floor and you have this horrible old software that you have to interact with that isn't a very good user experience. It doesn't look very nice. It's too many clicks to get places. You can't swipe. Those sort of things are frustrating and they jar. And that really means that you struggle with things like adoption. So yeah, I think things are moving on at a good pace, but there's plenty more to be done. That's for sure.
That's such an amazing point. I hadn't thought about that before. That young people are exposed to smartphones all the time, and they're used to those user interfaces, and they expect to see also the same mirrored in industrial systems. Pretty amazing insight. Appreciate that. Matt, yeah.
I was just going to say it's a hard mix, right? Because you've got new people on the shop floor who are often younger. Maybe they're, let's say, less wedded to staying in one job. They're happy to move around.
Yeah.
And they have high expectations of technology and software. But on the other hand, you have people who have been with the company much longer and perhaps didn't grow up with modern technology, with smartphones. And although they're used to using them, they have a different way of operating. They want to make sure things are, want big text, big buttons, clear visibility. The use cases and the needs are different, even within people on the same shop floor. So it's hard and important to try and strike that balance.
Makes sense. Matt, since you've spent so much time on actual shop floors as well, can you share a time when an MES significantly transformed a manufacturer's shop floor operations?
Yeah, which one to pick? There are so many options. I think probably the one I'll talk to you about is actually you could actually view it as a webinar on the Infor website. So perhaps I could share with you the link after this, and you could share it. There's a 45-minute webinar. There's actually a webinar on the Infor website for a company called Taylors of Harrogate. Taylors of Harrogate make Yorkshire tea, and they also make coffee. They had a 14% improvement in line efficiency. So double-digit line efficiency improvements, which had a huge impact for them. And they also got 24 times faster reaction time on the shop floor, primarily due to real-time visibility of shop floor operations and the ability for the MES to alert them and trigger for things to be done. And as a result of rolling that out, they actually had a return on investment within 12 months on their MES installation. So that was a really good success story, and also for a fantastic brand as well. Yorkshire tea is well known throughout the globe, I think. I seem to spot it everywhere I go. So yeah, that's a really great success story. And if you're interested in learning more, I can provide a link to that that's on the Infor website.
Would appreciate it, absolutely, and we're going to share it, as we share the podcast episode. Matt, what are the biggest misconceptions about MES adoption? You've talked about it a lot on your blog post, but wanted to kind of have put you on the spot and ask you that question as well. And how do you address those misconceptions, by the way?
Oh, there are so many. Because it's not that widely adopted and not that widely known about, there are lots of misconceptions. I think the biggest one is the confusion around where the boundaries between ERP and MES lie. There's a lot of what sounds like overlapping functionality. So yeah, if you're in ERP, you're talking about inventory, you're talking about quality, you're talking about production orders, and if you're in MES, you're talking about the same things. The trick is that ERP is doing that at a high level from a planning level. MES is actually executing that for operational users. It's a different user. It's an operational user versus an office user. It's much more detailed in MES, much more real time, much more granular. And often ERP doesn't want the detail. It wants to know what's happening and it wants to know the aggregated information. But if you hit ERP with all of the real-time information, you're just going to cripple it. It wasn't designed to do that. That's anyone who implements ERP will tell you that's not what it's designed to do. And you can get this much more granular view of what's happening in operations if you use an MES as well. So, I mean, a classic example for us, if you look at, let's say, inventory traceability. So traceability of inventory, you're looking at your finished goods. Let's look at all of the semi-finished materials and raw materials that went into that finished good. Well, you can do that in ERP. You might do that at a batch level, or you might do that at a serialized item level, depending on what the processes are. But are you capturing the quality checks that were done on each semi-finished material, or the quality checks that were done on the raw materials? Or are you capturing the tooling that was used? Or are you capturing the specific quantities that were used in that batch, rather than just saying some of that batch went into that semi-finished material? Often the answer is no, because ERPs don't typically work at that level. But MES can capture that, so you get a much richer picture, and you still can share that information back to ERP so that ERP sees the information that it needs to see, and everyone's happy. So I think that's a big misconception, is the boundaries, and I think that's primarily an educational piece. If you think about how many ERP experts there are in the world, there's loads. If you think about how many MES experts there are in the world, I mean, increasingly there are more and more and more, but it's not loads. It's not the same amount as it is with ERP.
Yeah.
The other thing I would say is the kind of confusion around the MES and MOM terms. I think that doesn't help. There's been a few posts on that on LinkedIn recently. MES typically is it's more focused on production in a true sense. Production counts, scrap counts, rework, downtime, job tracking, OEE, those sort of things are typically what you'd consider to be an MES. This new terminology, MOM, appeared, which was to make that broader, production, quality, inventory, maintenance. But that's more of a framework. And I think people don't really know so much about MOM. They know much more about MES, but even the MES information is very limited. So you end up with these two terms where it's just all a little bit confusing, and products on the market are really doing more than MES, but they're not advertising themselves as MOM because people don't know what MOM is. So you end up in this really sticky situation. There's not really a nice terminology to use for what a lot of the applications do. And if you take our application in particular, we do production, quality, inventory, logistics, maintenance, tooling, energy monitoring, workflows. It's incredibly broad.
Yeah.
We call it Infor MES because that's what the market expects. So yeah, I think that's a big misconception as well. Just what is the scope of MES in general?
Makes sense. No, that's really helpful. Matt, how do MOM and MES, how do they contribute to achieving end-to-end digital transformation in manufacturing?
Yeah. Well, firstly, they don't do it on their own. It's an ecosystem. You have to think about the bigger picture for sure. But I think I would say MES and MOM applications are really the backbone of digital transformation in manufacturing. You're not going to transform your shop floor. You're not going to have a smart factory. You're not going to achieve Industry 4.0 without an MES or a MOM application. You just can't do it. Now, you can't do it on your own. You need equipment, you need automation, you might need changes to the way your teams work, to manufacturing processes, to business processes. You might need other applications that are supporting. Maybe you need to do that in conjunction with a new ERP or a new PLM or a new APS system. So there's lots of things that all come together, but it's certainly a very key contributing factor to digitally transforming operations.
Got it. Makes sense. And switching gears a little bit, AI is, of course, really hot these days. Everybody's talking about AI. What role does AI and automation play in maybe the current generation and the next generation of MES solutions?
Yeah, I think there's always, we always say AI. There's actually several different buckets of AI. Some AI is kind of like, let's say, machine learning. Machine learning is very powerful. It's harder to implement because with machine learning, you have to come up with a hypothesis. What do I think the outcome would be, and what information do I need to feed into a model to be able to detect that an event has happened, or there's a problem, or we're reaching a threshold, or whatever. You have to train the model up to get to the point where it can actually output something that's helpful. There's always some ambiguity around whether you've got all of the right information to feed into that model. If you only put in 80% of the parameters that are needed because you were a bit ignorant to the fact that there were 20% of other parameters that you hadn't even factored in, then your model is going to be built on the wrong assumptions, and you might not get the right output. But if you can get good ML models built up, then you can have a lot of success with automating things and with picking up things that you perhaps wouldn't pick up without AI, which is fantastic. I think I wrote this on my blog, but predictive maintenance and SPC. Okay, maybe you can't say they're AI technically, but it's those kind of processes where you're getting a lot of value from data collection, data analysis, and an output, ideally before a problem has occurred. And in both of those cases, you're trying to identify there will be a problem and react to that ahead of time to reduce your scrap, or to fix a problem before an asset goes down. So there are some elements of that are already kind of bubbling around, which is good. Then there's another chunk, which is generative AI. And generative AI is, I think, in general, much easier to implement. That's come on a long way in the last few years. That's really good at things like looking at data and giving you summarized views, or just getting some more insight from the existing data that you have. So, for example, again, in our product, we've got the ability to take a complex report and ask questions of it, and it will give you a summary. It will give you insights, surprisingly good insights, actually. When we first implemented it, we wanted to do it, and we looked at the answers, and we read through and we're like, wow, this is actually really, really good. But it's not the same as ML. They're very, very different. And you can apply the generative AI to any data set and it will give you an answer. But you have to be really considerate about the ML applications that you look to implement.
Makes sense. That's really, really insightful. Matt, how do manufacturers ensure that MES solutions remain agile and adaptable to changing market conditions? Market is, what we are seeing is that consumers are demanding more and more customizations in the products that they expect from manufacturers. There are seasonal variations in demand as well across industries. We play in automotive, med devices, a couple of those industries. They are different from food, but how do MES, how does it remain agile and more adaptable to how the market is changing?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think it's got a lot to do with the software that you choose. I did a post the other day actually on LinkedIn talking about the differences between what is extensibility, what is customization. And you have to be really careful, because if you go ahead and you start customizing the application really heavily, then you make it really difficult to maintain going forward. You probably want to try and adopt as many of your business processes and manufacturing processes as you can to the software. That doesn't mean you have to do everything. There's, there might be some things that you want to change, but the more you stick to the out of the box standards and the general configuration options that are presented to you, I think in the longer term you're going to have more success and lower total cost of ownership. I do see a lot of people who want basically to have ultimate flexibility or to do exactly what their homegrown application did.
Yeah.
And although it's okay to do that if you really think you need it, I think there's a big caution that goes with that, because doing that is perhaps not the right thing for your business in the long term. You need to be more agile. You need to be able to deliver innovations faster. You need to be able to get the latest version of the software more easily. And if you kind of pigeonhole yourself into just building your own MES that works for you on someone else's platform, then it's actually not a very good way to proceed.
Yeah.
So yeah, my advice would be pick a MES that is configurable. You absolutely want to be able to configure the way that your processes work. You want lots of standard configuration options for how a particular process should work. So let's say, for example, does it do normal production? Does it do co-production? Is it an oven because they behave in different ways? Is it a washing machine? Is it a mixing process? If you can start to get those things configured as a standard, then that's great. And then you want to be able to configure your own reports and configure your own screens. What you don't want is to have a very fixed set of reports that don't give you the information you need, and then you need to create copies of those reports and write your own ones. And then you want to build your own dashboards, but you can't because the software doesn't allow you to, and you have to go back to the vendor. And every time you want to make a change, it costs you more money, and that's just a terrible way to work. So yeah, when you're picking an application, those are the sort of things you should look at. What level of configuration do I have from a master data perspective? And what level of configuration do I have from a reporting and screens perspective? Those are really key questions to ask.
That makes sense. Far too many times I've talked to manufacturers, and it turns out that they, 10 years ago, they hired an intern who knew how to use Microsoft Access and built out their MES essentially. And now they need help from their CIO. They have a corporate team that does interesting things, but the CIO can't help them because they have something totally custom built and that resides on that machine. But I really love that insight. Yeah. That you want to stick to some amount of guidelines, certain guidelines that the vendor provides while being reconfigurable, reconfigure to a certain extent, but don't expect to just completely not have to change your processes at all, because I see, if I understood you correctly.
Yeah, the more flexible you can be when you're I think if you're a manufacturer and you want to transform your operations, then you don't necessarily want to do exactly what you were doing before, just in a new bit of software. It's about change. It's about identifying parts of your process that can be improved or supported with software. It's about identifying bottlenecks in the process. I don't just mean the manufacturing process. I mean the processes surrounding the manufacturing process. It's about making sure that you've got the right information to hand, and that might mean doing things slightly differently. That causes another problem because you have to manage change management and you have to get people on board and the buy-in from leadership and from people on the shop floor. But you have to do some of those things anyway. You're not going to have a successful project without doing those things. So now's the time. You're already going to them. You're already asking for them to change the way they're working. Ask for a little bit more, because in the long run, it will be the right thing to do and it will benefit the business.
Makes sense. And I feel anyways, when you are a vendor who's working with a lot of manufacturers, you adapt a lot of the best practices across the industry. And if as one manufacturer I'm roughly complying with that software, then I'm automatically virtually learning from the whole industry by virtue of doing it. But this is fantastic. Matt, what are some of the biggest challenges that manufacturers face when implementing MES, and how can they overcome those challenges?
I think probably the biggest challenge from a manufacturer perspective is actually getting the right resource available on your side to make the change happen. Because you're asking a lot of these people, right? You want to create a center of excellence team. You need a really strong project manager. This team needs to have knowledge about all the different processes in your business. It needs to have relationships with the relevant teams. You need to understand in detail how those particular manufacturing processes work to the point where you can critique them and say, should we change something here? Yeah, to the conversation we were just having a second ago. And those people are hard to find. And when you do find them, they're very busy. Those are the people in your organization who are already doing, a myriad of different tasks, and they're being pulled in every single direction. But you need them. You need them to make the project successful. If you don't have them, or if they need more support, then you need to upskill or you need to hire. And you need to make those decisions early, because you don't want to find out that you need to hire someone just as your project's kicking off, because it's going to take them a year to get up to speed. So yeah, forward plan, identify the resources that you need, identify the skills that you need, create a strong team, a really strong team who understand the processes, and try and find vendors and partners that you can work with collaboratively, where it doesn't feel like it's an us and a them. It's got to feel like an us. Everyone is pulling in the same direction, trying to work towards the same thing. And when you get that kind of synergy across the different teams, you can have a really successful implementation. But you've got to have the right team, you've got to have the right partner, the right vendor, and you've got to have buy-in from leadership, and all those other good things.
Yeah, 100%. Makes sense. Matt, what are the key trends in MES that you think are going to shape the industry over the next 5 years?
Well, I mean, AI is the obvious one, right? That's just going to keep getting better and better. There's no doubt about that. I think digital twins are becoming increasingly popular. And again, there's different types of digital twin, but I would argue that an MES is a digital twin, because it is capturing everything that's happening in your factory in real time, and it's presenting it to you on a screen. I think that will advance into things like what if scenarios. So I've got the model, I've got real-time visibility of what's happening. What would happen if I put another machine in parallel there where I've got a bottleneck? How would that look? How would my output be affected? Is it worth the investment? I think those sort of things will come. I think they'd probably. I mean, AI is going to be everywhere, right? That's the big one.
Makes sense. Oh yeah, 100%. Matt, how do you see MES and cloud-based technologies working together? I know you folks are a premier vendor of cloud-based MES, but there are some manufacturers who are still skeptical, or at least plant level leadership. Sometimes when I talk to them, they're still talking about on-prem solutions. How does that work? What's the benefit of going cloud versus staying on-prem?
Yeah, it's a good question. So Infor are a cloud company. The MES at the point of acquisition was not cloud, and we're working to make it cloud now. So there's an option for cloud. And we think that's important because especially larger customers, many sites, it's important to have the scalability in the infrastructure and architecture. But it's also important that people, if you want to deliver innovation, then you need regular updates. What you don't want to do is install the software, wait 5 years, and then do an upgrade, because there's 5 years of innovation that you're missing out on. So that's the benefit of cloud, I think, is that you get these continuous updates where you can continue to take the latest version, continue to take new innovations, continue to improve the way that you work inside your company. Of course, you also get the benefits of scalability, of security, and you don't have to manage it yourself. You don't have to buy your own database licenses for whichever platform you're currently operating. You don't have to do your own backups. It's all taken care of it for you. So I think that's probably the main set of benefits. I think that there's a lot of hesitancy in some areas of the market where people don't think that they're ready for cloud. But I would argue that actually, when was the last time you had a a really serious internet outage at a factory. Maybe in some places in the world that's more often than not, but often people have redundancy in place for those types of events, and increasingly, the latency is minimal. You'd be pinging yourself over all different types of websites in general. You don't often notice a lag.
Yeah.
And we have customers that are using centralized MES systems across their global operations, and it's fast. There isn't a problem there. So yeah, you have to then consider the on-site components. If you want to collect data via OPC or you want to do label printing, you need some connection back to that environment. But that's fine. That's not a problem. So I think as people become more and more comfortable with the idea of cloud, it will accelerate rapidly. There are going to be areas where that's never possible, where you've got data residency, those sort of things. In aerospace and defense, I think it's going to be a lot more difficult, for example. So there will always be areas of the market who want to continue on premise, but I definitely think that cloud that's what's going to hit the market. And there are a lot of people in terms of MES vendors out there who have done things around like reporting in the cloud and then maybe something on-prem. But actually, yeah, it's going to evolve for sure.
Makes sense. Matt, last question, and a question that I really like asking all my guests. What is the one thing that manufacturers don't do enough of to be factory forward in 2025?
They don't talk to their operators enough.
Right.
I think yeah, if you want to, it's good to have the big picture strategy, right? The operators aren't going to come up with that. Or maybe they will, but they're probably not going to come up with that. You need a strategy, you need a vision, you need a direction of travel. But don't forget to include the operators in that, because they're the people. I mean, if you think of an operator, they are on the shop floor. They are responsible for executing the schedule. They're responsible for the materials that are being made, making sure the OEE is good, making sure they're not scrapping too much material, responsible for doing quality checks or for taking samples off the line to take them to the lab. They might be doing their own autonomous maintenance checks. They're responsible for consuming materials into the process. They're responsible for printing labels. They're doing everything, absolutely everything. And we ask a lot of them. And the whole point of putting an MES in is to make their life easier, provide them with work instructions, trigger them to do the right thing at the right time, provide them with the information that they need. If we can do more of that, then you end up with a happier, more productive, more engaged workforce. And that's what drives your factory forward. It's technology in combination with people and in combination with the right processes. You can't just do the technology on its own. It's never going to work.
I love that. You just stole the show with that. Thank you so much, Matt. This was fun, and I learned a lot. Just in these 30 minutes that I've been talking to you. Would love to have you again on the show. But again, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it.
I've really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for having me. And I hope people found it useful. Don't forget to check out that webinar. We'll put the link in.
Yes, sir. Absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Talk to you again soon.
And that's a wrap on this powerhouse episode of Factory Forward. If you love this episode, share it with your network and keep the conversation going on social media using #FactoryForward. Until next time, keep challenging the status quo and striving for excellence. Thanks for joining us, and we'll catch you in the next episode of Factory Forward.